Hey y'all, welcome back to the Holistic Sovereign Show. My name is Lisa. I am your host, and today we're going to talk about the assumed name, the legal entity, the artificial person. All of these are referring to the exact same concept, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And we are going to dive into the legal side of things because obviously this is, like I said, a legal entity that was created using your birth certificate, which we talked about in the last episode on the show. So if you haven't seen the birth certificate episode, which is episode 2, you can go ahead and jump in and watch that. But this is the most important thing, I believe, in the sovereignty space that you could learn about. And I honestly think this is going to be the most important episode of this show. So please share this with someone that you care about. Please share this with anyone and everyone. I honestly think that this is important information for everybody out there to be aware of what is happening, because ignorance is really the weapon that they have used against us to put us in this position. So obviously we want to enlighten people. And I'm really excited to dive into this. I've had a lot of people who have been in the sovereignty space 2, 5, 10 years that have come to me and said, I have been studying this information for so long, and this is the first time I've come across this concept. So that is really my goal, is to just connect the dots for you guys to, fill in those missing pieces in your research. So I'm hoping that that does that for you. And I'm, again, really excited for this episode. I think it's going to be really, really eye-opening for a lot of you guys in more ways than you think. Even if you've watched my TikTok content and you think you know everything there is to know about this, you are about to be surprised. So buckle up and let's get started. Before we dive in here, I wanted to share with you guys, please, 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 go watch this video. I will have this linked below in the description. You will be amazed. This is, especially if you are a Christian, this will explain why the authorities and the forces that be are doing what they're doing. Because I think one of the questions that comes up when we think about, well, why are they even creating this whole doppelganger system, right? Like, why are they creating this legal entity in my name to use in commerce? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And there's some things that you can make sense of why they're doing this. However, what it really comes down to is what is presented in this 3.5 hour long video. I know that seems long, okay? And not all of us have the attention span for it. But if you are truly a seeker of the truth, you need to watch this. Especially if you're a Christian. Especially. But if you're not, that does not matter. This might just save you, okay? So please go watch this video. This is by far the best explanation and connector of dots that I have come across. And thankfully, this was shared with me by my mentor, Bill, who I've mentioned in probably my last episode. I did mention him in my last episode. I talked about him and I shared his Facebook group. But he shared this with me because he saw that I was a genuine seeker of the truth and somebody who wanted to learn more about this. So this goes so much deeper. This whole doppelganger system that they've created, guys, goes so much deeper than just the legal system, than just the current society we live in, than just America. Okay, and we'll go into that a little bit more here. Very, very, skimming the surface, honestly, because this video is on another level. This is life-saving information. And it might make you it's hard to digest. It can be hard to digest. So just beware. If you can't get through the full 3 hours in a sitting, split it up. Watch an hour when you can, watch another hour when you can. Like take the week, to watch it and just put time into it. But I think this is really important. Again, I'm going to have this linked in the description below. It's going to be the first link. So please watch this video and subscribe to this channel. It is amazing. I've only watched this video so far, but he has so many more. And the gentleman who he references in this video and whose content he also uses is a great person to also follow. So please watch this when you can. This is going to bring so many of the pieces puzzle together for you. Okay? So just wanted to put that out there. If you're really, really a seeker of the truth, this is what you should be, this should be the next thing you should be watching. But without further ado, let's get into the contents of this video. Alright, so if you're here, whether you're brand new or if you've seen my information on TikTok and you've heard me talk about the legal entity, by now we know that the United States government and pretty much any country with a centralized bank system has this same system set up, is that they create a legal entity that is basically a doppelganger of you, and it is a fictitious entity, right? However, I wanted to show you guys this video from the Bible Project to show you that this concept is not new, okay? This concept of people taking on names and having to live in a society that is not built for you to succeed is not new, okay? So I wanted to watch this with you guys. This is a video from the Bible Project, which is an incredible channel that you guys can watch if you're someone, whether you're Christian or you're not, and you just want to, start to study the Bible for like legal purposes, because, everything comes from the Bible, and you'll hear this all the time in the sovereignty space. But I wanted to show this to you specifically because in this story, there's a few different things we're going to look at that are parallels to our current system. So let's go ahead and watch this together.
In the year 587 BC, the city of Jerusalem was attacked by the Babylonian Empire. And a year later, the city and the temple were plundered and burned.
Thousands of Israelites were taken from their homes and relocated all over ancient Babylon. They became exiles.
And so now they're a minority, surrounded by a new culture with new gods.
Now, some Israelites chose to resist Babylon by revolting or withdrawing. Others gave in, adopting the Babylonian way of life and accepting these new gods as their own.
And you might think those are your only two options, but the prophet Jeremiah told them to do something totally different and surprising.
Pay attention to
settle
this.
in, build houses, plant gardens, grow families, and most surprisingly, to seek the well-being of Babylon and pray to the Lord on its behalf.
So this is like a third way.
Yeah, it's not compromise or revolt.
What does it look like?
Well, there's a whole book of the Bible that explores that question. It's the story of Daniel.
Daniel was one of the Israelites taken into the Babylonian exile.
And because Daniel had a royal heritage and education, he was recruited along with some friends to work in the high court of Babylon.
Work for the enemy? That would be compromise. Or they could gain the king's trust, take him down from the inside.
That's what you might expect, but instead, they take Jeremiah's advice and choose the third way. They serve the king of Babylon, taking on Babylonian names and even clothing style.
So they seek Babylon's well-being. But in doing so, aren't they just giving up their heritage?
It could seem that way, but actually they aren't. As you read on, the story focuses on moments where they draw the line, and they choose faithfulness to their God and resist the influence of Babylon.
So, for example?
Well, like when they're commanded to bow down to the idol of Babylon and give allegiance to the king as if he's a god.
They won't go that far.
Right. This is where you see their true loyalty. It requires them to critique Babylon's idolatry of power, its arrogance, its injustice, but they do it non-violently by laying down their lives. And so God vindicates Daniel and his friends for their faithfulness.
So they would serve Babylon, seek its well-being, but their loyalty was always to God.
Yeah, this is what Jeremiah was envisioning. The way of the exile is a combination of loyalty and also subversion.
So they're still exiles, but don't Daniel and his friends long to go home?
Yes, in fact, Daniel believed that God was going to send a ruler to bring down Babylon and create a true kingdom of peace.
When did he think this ruler would come?
Well, at first he thought within his lifetime, but then he had a dream where he found out that after Babylon would come another oppressive empire, then another, then another.
And so, Babylon did fall, and Israel did get to go back home, but now they're ruled by Babylon's successors.
And so they maintained the mindset of an exile, waiting for their true home to come to them. And they continued the same practice of loyalty and subversion to any new versions of Babylon that came along. And this leads us to the time of Jesus.
The empire of his day was Rome, ruled by Caesar. Now, some Israelites wanted to resist, while others gave in and adopted Roman culture and its gods.
But watch Jesus carry on the subversive loyalty of Daniel. Like when he said, it's fine to pay taxes to Caesar, give him back his coins. But then he said, don't mistake Caesar for God. God's the one who deserves your total life and allegiance.
So the way of Jesus is this same mix of loyalty and subversion.
Yeah, like he taught his followers to love and even bless their enemies. But he also got arrested for speaking out against the corrupt leaders of Jerusalem and Rome. He critiqued their idolatry of power, and it cost him his life. But God vindicated him by raising him from the dead as the true king of the nations.
The king that Daniel had hoped for.
Right. And Jesus promised that one day his kingdom would prevail.
And so until then, his followers are living in a type of exile.
Yeah, this is why the Apostle Peter calls followers of Jesus foreigners and exiles. He told them to respect the authorities of whatever place you happen to live, to honor and love all people, but then he reminds them that this isn't their true home. They're still living in Babylon.
But, well, they're not living in Babylon. Babylon doesn't exist anymore.
Or does it? In the Bible, Babylon has become a symbol that describes any human institution that demands allegiance to its idolatrous redefinitions of good and evil.
Okay, so we all live and work in Babylon. How do I seek the well-being of Babylon while my allegiance is to someone greater?
Yes, Jesus' followers are called to live in that tension between loyalty and subversion. That's the way of the exile.
All right. So I wanted to show this because I wanted y'all to see that the parallels are there, right? Like, you can't tell me we don't live in Babylon, okay? However, what I wanted to focus on specifically is that when Daniel went to work for the king, he took on a new name, right? So they all took on new names. So he gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar. And then the others got new names too. So it's the same thing that's happening now, right? It's just that they aren't giving you a new name. They're just using your existing name and commercializing it and creating a business out of it, right? So I just wanted to show you this concept is not new. This isn't something that just popped up out of nowhere. And if you watch that video that I talked about in the beginning, this video here, Mystery of Life, then it's going to make a lot more sense, okay? All of this doppelganger nonsense that's been going on since the beginning of time. And a lot of other things will make sense to you. So I wanted to watch that, and then there's another video that I was going to watch with you guys. I don't think that we need to. It basically just talks about the idea of being in exile, being a sojourner, and this is another video by the Bible Project, so if you want to go watch this, you can. It's called The Human Condition You Can't Escape. I think this will also kind of make a few light bulbs go off in your heads, but we won't watch that now. I'm going to go ahead and close that. But this, again, like I said, was really important for me to show to y'all because, again, we're just seeing we're living in Babylon, right? And what they chose to do, right, what Daniel and his friends chose to do, unlike many Israelites, is they chose to take the prophet Jeremiah's advice, which is to love and honor all people and to pray for the well-being of Babylon, okay? So if anyone here is questioning, well, how should I go about this? Because this is something that I get all of the time. People tell me all of the time that they are upset and they want to revolt, okay? And we saw that in the video. That's what some Israelites did. They revolted, and then others just fully conformed to the culture, right? So Jeremiah gives us a third way. He says, well, actually, this is what God wants you to do. So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, what is the biblical way? What is the God-honoring way for me to show up in the society? Well, it is to respect the authorities of whatever place you're living in. In our case, it's here in the United States of America, right? This landmass that we live in. But that does not mean that you should conform to all of their satanic practices and what they're trying to enforce on you, right? You should resist that peacefully, okay? Just like it said in the video, just like it says in the book of Daniel, right? So I just wanted to bring that forth to y'all. I know that this is not a popular concept amongst you. Most of you fall into the rebel sector of, you know, if we're talking about the Israelites, like you're like the rebellious Israelites that just want to revolt and be violent and, you know, put a finger up to the system. But that's not what God wants you to do, okay? God does not want you to do that. That is not what the Bible teaches us to do, okay? So you can interpret this however you want. There's obviously a lot more nuance to this, and that's what this show is all about, is going into those nuances and walking that fine line of being both submersive, right? But also not just completely abandoning your values and your God and being dishonorable. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the actual content, into this PDF here by Herrick Douglas Joseph. So this is a trailblazing, revolutionary document that came out. This was created by a gentleman. His name is Herrick Douglas Joseph, and he studied the law for, 20 plus years, and this is what he came to, and he, learned what was happening. He was the one who kind of figured out, and I'm sure he wasn't the first person, but he was the first person to share it in this way online, where it started to get traction, and anyone who, again, is a seeker of the truth is going to come to this conclusion, and it's what makes the most sense because it's all in the laws, right? It's all there. So that's what we're going to dive into here. Big shout out to Herrick Douglas Joseph, and shout out to my mentor Bill, who also, introduced me to this. I just did a lot of research in his group and came across this, and it was very self-explanatory. I will tell you now that this PDF at times can be kind of hard to get through because Douglas Joseph is old-schooled, if you will, not necessarily politically correct, which I don't think most of you care about, but I'm just warning you ahead of time if you're someone that's, easily offended, which I don't think is the case with most of you, but I am just going to say that. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Everything in commerce is fictional, including that legal name you always thought was you. Artificial person, legal definition. A legal entity that is not a human being, but for certain purposes is considered by virtue of statute to be a natural person. A corporation is considered an artificial person for service of process. Here is a hint. That person that is served a summons is an artificial person in the case of a lawsuit, which is a business transaction. Get it? This simply means that the person being served is not a human being. Here's the next line of that same definition. Artificial person. In a figurative sense, a body of men or a company are sometimes called an artificial person because the law associates them as one and gives them various powers possessed by natural persons. In a figurative sense, meaning in any imaginary situation, this is what an artificial person really is and what it means in that context. So the next question is, what is a natural person? If you are in a body of men that consider themselves a citizen of the United States, a body politic such as Russia, France, Canada, Mexico, etc., then you are also considered to be a natural person by the online legal definition above and are non-living. So now let's define a natural person in the exact same online legal dictionary source. Now before we dive into that, this court summons, okay, being served a summons, this is how many people have gotten court cases dismissed, and what they stand on, okay? What they have to stand on is that when you are served a court summons, it is not being served to you, the living man or woman. It's being served to an artificial entity. Pray tell, do you think that the corporation of McDonald's can be served a summons? No, it's a corporation. It can't show up in a court of law. Can the state of Texas be served a summons? No, it can't. It's an entity. It cannot show up in a courtroom and argue for itself. A representative of said business, of said entity, has to show up in court. Okay? Does that make sense? Let's keep going. A natural person, okay, is a real human being as distinguished from a corporation, which is often treated at law as a fictitious person. Here's another legal definition of natural person from Cornell Law School. A living human being. Legal systems can attach rights and duties to natural persons without their express consent. This is also important to remember, okay? Because this is something else that I get people screaming at me about in the comments, is saying, well, I never consented to this. Well, first of all, hold on. Your parents did, okay, by making you a citizen when you were born, by signing off on that birth certificate. So they agreed, all right? Sorry, that's just how it works. And their ancestors before them did, like, they opted you into the system. So I don't care if you want to scream and shout and kick your feet and say, oh, I didn't agree, I didn't give consent. Your parents did on your behalf because you couldn't. Okay, so don't come into my comments screaming about that. It's ridiculous. Anyway, let's keep going. But wait, don't those two definitions contradict one another? Of course, they do have to, otherwise someone would come along and figure out they are not U.S. citizens. And that would screw everything up for those attorneys and judges that are controlling your minds. You see, they're not controlling the system. Your actions do that for them. I want you all to pay attention to what he's saying here. I want you all to pay attention to what he's saying here, because this is where so many of you get lost in when I talk about this information. You simply cannot take responsibility. You refuse. You can't take responsibility for the fact that your parents enrolled you into the voluntary system. You can't take any responsibility for the fact that you have continued to volunteer yourself by getting a driver's license and all this other stuff, okay? And ignorance of the law is no excuse. This is what I tell y'all all the time. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Just because you did not go over the terms and conditions of said agreement, or ask for the terms and conditions of said agreement, which is all in the law, by the way, just because you did not put in time and effort into studying the law, doesn't mean that it's not out there for you to understand what's happening. Okay? So all you've kept on checking terms and conditions your entire life, metaphorically, for every single thing you've ever done, and now you're mad. And you're like, I've been deceived. Let's keep going. You see, they are not controlling the system. Your actions do that for them. Everything is voluntary, so when you partake as a citizen of the United States, you are already in trouble. Still want to be one? That's fine with me. But if you are whining about how intrusive government is in your life, go whine elsewhere, because the government has nothing to do with your woes. It's your fault, stupid. Before you get mad and throw something at me, let's legally define what a fictitious person is. Person. This is what is shown as a legal definition when fictitious person was input. In general usage, a human being. By statute, however, the term can include firms, labor organizations, partnerships, associations, corporations, legal representatives, trustees in bankruptcy, or receivers. A corporation is a person for purposes of the constitutional guarantees of equal protection of laws and due process of law. Foreign governments otherwise eligible to sue in United States courts are persons entitled to institute a suit for treble damages for alleged antitrust violations under the Clayton Act. Illegitimate children are persons within the meaning of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Y'all can go and look up any and all of this that's in here, okay? You can look up the Clayton Act, you can look at the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, you can look at all these things and verify for yourselves, okay? The phrase interested person refers to heirs, devisees, children, spouses, creditors, beneficiaries, and any others having a property right in or a claim against a trust estate or the estate of a descendant, ward, or protected person. It also refers to personal representatives and to fiduciaries. West Encyclopedia of American Law is where that's from, or it's rather what the next definition is from. Person, a human being. A corporation treated as having the rights and obligations of a person. Counties and cities can be treated as a person in the same manner as a corporation. However, corporations, counties, and cities cannot have the emotions of humans such as malice and therefore are not liable for punitive damages. The object of legal rights. There are two kinds of legal person: human beings and artificial persons, such as corporations. A partnership in England is not a separate legal person, but in Scotland it is said to have quasi-personality. So what does this really mean? These definitions are very confusing to the average man or woman, but not to me. Take a look at what is below on that same page. Person. This word is applied to men, women, and children, who are called natural persons. In law, man and person are not exactly synonymous terms. Any human being is a man, whether he be a member of society or not, whatever may be the rank he holds, or whatever may be his age, sex, etc. A person is a man considered according to the rank he holds in society, with all the rights to which the place he holds entitles him, and the duties which it imposes. It is also used to denote a corporation, which is an artificial person. But when the word persons is spoken of in legislative acts, natural persons will be intended unless something appear in the context to show that it applies to artificial persons. Natural persons are divided into males or men and females or women. Men are capable of all kinds of engagements and functions unless by reasons applying to particular individuals. Women cannot be appointed to any public office nor perform any civil functions except those which the law specifically declares them capable of exercising. Women don't seem to like this part. Before you go in the comments and start screaming at me about how politically incorrect and anti-feminist and whatever you're going to scream at me about, okay? Please, focus on the actual point of this whole thing, because I've had people get mad over just a little. This is why the PC culture just irritates the hell out of me, because y'all will hyper-focus on something so irrelevant and not focus on the big picture, okay? Get out of your emotions, put it aside, get mad later when you can have a nice cup of tea and be angry in peace and journal it out. But right now, we're just looking at the bigger picture, okay? So before you go in the comments, let it go. Okay, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Okay. All right. They are also sometimes divided into free persons and slaves. Free men are those who have preserved their natural liberty, that is to say, who have the right of doing what is not forbidden by the law. A slave is one who is in the power of a master to whom he belongs. Slaves are sometimes ranked not with persons but things. But sometimes they are considered as persons. For example, I'm not going to say that word, is in contemplation of law a person, so as to be capable of committing a riot in conjunction with white men. Persons are also divided into citizens and aliens when viewed with regard to their political rights. When they are considered in relation to their civil rights, they are living or civilly dead, such as outlaws and infamous persons. Persons are divided into legitimates and bastards when examined as to their rights by birth. When viewed in their domestic relations, they are divided into parents and children, husbands and wives, guardians and wards, and masters and servants' son, as it is understood in law. How about the legal definition of a legal person? Here it is. An individual, company, or other entity that has legal rights and is subject to obligations. A legal person is legally defined an individual, a company, a group of persons, or some other entity. So this, of course, means that an individual is an entity, a thing that is obviously not living. Why? Because there's no such thing as a living entity. Entities are intangible things that have no life in them. A living man may control an entity in business transactions, provided the legal name of that entity has been legally and properly registered by that man. Okay? This is important. This is what we're looking at here. Okay? You should begin to see what is going on and how the law only applies to non-living entities, which in turn means those same laws cannot possibly apply to you as the living man controlling that business entity. It is also obvious why there will be blowback from those people who are earning a healthy income and feel threatened by what I am showing them. I am not the threat, though. I am simply showing people the truth, and that is what frightens them. If this does not open your eyes, then perhaps nothing will. The legal definition of person encompasses the fictional nature of all law and government, because it can only deal with persons that are not living entities, also known as artificial persons, natural men and women, fictitious persons, and the like. This is the holy grail of law and commerce, folks. In the business world of the courts only have jurisdiction over your person, not over the living man, which of course is you. I'm devoting a lot more time to this part of the puzzle because within these definitions I've shown you above lies the ultimate illusion. Herein lies the key to what we are doing to ourselves without knowing it and how we are doing this out of ignorance. Ignorance is different than stupidity, though, and I will explain that this way. Ignorance is a state of being uninformed and unaware. It can also mean that a person is lazy to notice something or is doing so deliberately. As for stupidity, it is knowing what is right and trying to find it in the wrong. Stupidity is not the lack of knowledge, but the illusion of having it. An attorney at law is stupid, not ignorant. Everything in law has been created by attorneys and bankers, central banks, and world banks to form organizations called governments. This is a fictional realm that includes all written laws governing commerce and trade. It's referred to as the UCC, and it is a humongous trap that was created as a means to lure unsuspecting men and women into the layer of evil. But people are getting suckered in to volunteering without realizing it, and this is something that I did until I realized that I was screwing myself and decided to stop partaking in the self-inflicted pain and suffering I was causing by my acts. Yes, I was my own worst enemy at one time. Now I have no enemies at all. I stopped fighting. Who wants to fight anyway? Especially if you're losing those fights most of the time. You are just trying to survive while I am really living. You may not see this yet, but you may eventually if you don't give up learning. Attorneys have created all the rules that make up the rule of law, but they have hidden in plain sight the most important rule of all. When I say everything in commerce is fiction, I really mean everything, because all of those written laws regulating commerce are fictional, fake, make-believe. Nothing within that commercial world can be real, and I mean nothing, including you. I've made an astounding discovery that I'm now sharing with you and everyone else that cares to know what I do. I not only have seen other men living as I do, I have not seen any man living as I do, nor have I read anything similar to this paper I have authored. I did not learn this from the internet, sorry Mr. Gore, but the internet makes registering a snap and also assists in people discovering for themselves what I'm showing you now. I've uploaded and updated this paper to my Scribed account page for people to view and download for free. I want people to discover this on their own with just a little assistance being necessary. I'm showing you the door, you must walk through it. So here's what I put all together. Here's how I put this all together. I discovered that I have been doing everything wrong, but so is everyone else, so I was in good company and most certainly not alone. Since I first wrote about this 2 years ago, I have learned many more things that have further served to confirm I am correct about what I am about to explain in detail to you now. I now control the legal business entity that operates in that fictional realm for me in commerce, and this allows me to transact business in the state for a profit, legally, for the first time in my life. 50 plus years of living a lie is long enough in my humble opinion, and it was obvious to me when I found it that I had been doing this wrong all along. It explained why my ass was handed to me so many times before in court and then provided me with the ability to turn the tables around 180 degrees. You see, there's a law in the books that they never told us about, and I found it hidden in plain sight, right under our collective noses. Now let's pause here. If you watch that 3-hour-long video that I recommended to you, you are going to realize the truth is always hidden in plain sight. You have just been programmed to not think anything of it. By mainstream media, by anything you can think of that exists in our world. Most of it is programming you. Everything is always programming you, but the way that our media is set up is it is very meticulously and systematically created to hide the truth in plain sight. But once you have discernment, if you pray for discernment, it gets easier to identify it. So here I want to address a common comment that I get, which is of the rebellious nature, people saying, well, why would I want to perpetuate their lie, yada, yada, yada. Okay, well, first of all, you're not, right? Because you're not completely giving up who you are. We already talked about this in the example of the book of Daniel, right? Where Daniel and his friends took on Babylonian names, but they made sure to draw a line when they were being forced to go against God and God's law, right? To sin against God. They drew a line there. But other than that, they made sure to respect the authorities and the laws that are present in their society. It's the same thing here, okay? The reason that you register that legal entity is because it is biblical. That's what God wants you to do, okay? So let's keep going here. That law clearly states that in order to transact business legally, everyone must use a legal name that has been registered properly with the Secretary of State to create a legal business entity that can then be used to legally operate in that fictional realm. This is something we all must do, meaning not optional, okay? Because this is also a question I get. Well, why would I need to do this? It's in the law, and it's also biblical, okay? With the specific exception of attorneys, judges, clerks, officers of the court, and high-ranking bank officials, officers of the banks, which makes complete sense because they are the entities that have all the privileges and they make all the rules. If we don't follow those rules, though, there is no exceptions and we suffer the penalty of failing to do so. Filing that legal name that appears on the certificate of live birth by using the assumed name certificate is 100% legal and makes absolute sense in what seems to most people as a world gone totally mad. This is what I teach in Claim the Name, y'all. If you go down in the description below and you get my course, I walk you through step by step how to register that assumed name so you can get an assumed name certificate and get that registration done with. This is what he's talking about here. This is what I teach y'all. And this is why it's important. Okay, that's what this whole episode is about. It explains why we have been at a disadvantage and allows us to connect all the dots which were missing before. No one can force anyone to do anything. Everything is voluntary, and that of course includes transacting business in the state. But if you choose to participate in that game of commerce, you had better educate yourself first and know what you're doing. This is mandatory for all business entities, including corporations, but my business is not a corporation and requires no license to operate legally. It does require that the legal name be filed to create that legal entity, though, and everyone has no clue what they're doing to themselves. To claim that you are a legal name is a lie, because a legal name is a non-living entity. There is no incentive for any government employee to inform us of this requirement, and very few of them know what I'm telling you anyway. This legal requirement is universal, and every state has their own version of the DBA, which, depending on the size and population of the state, may be handled by the county's clerk office, which is a sub-entity of the Secretary of State's office. It is the only way the system can work properly for them, because when people discover that they are screwing up, they stop doing what they had been doing, and this puts a damper on the state's ability to collect tax revenue, eventually leading to a serious decline in earnings. Let's not fool anyone. The government is a for-profit business entity, and it's big business now. So this is not something that we can expect its employees to accept easily. But the truth is, those employees have no choice. There's no immunity for any government employee, including judges. In California, the legislation that mandates legal compliance for all legal names transacting business in the state of a profit may be found in Code 17900 through 17930 of the California Business and Professions Code. This is where the law refers to the legal requirement to file a fictitious business name statement with the county clerk's office, and this legislation has been modified dramatically in recent years because it was obvious that people were beginning to see that the problem was with the use of that legal name. The form for California is designed to prevent you from filing properly, and this, of course, is intentional. Alex Padilla's office is ripe for a huge lawsuit because it knows I have found fraud within that state-mandated form the county clerk claims everyone must use. The government agency that generally registers all legal business names in this state, which means in the United States, is the Secretary of State. The government created the legal name expressed on the certificate of live birth, but failed to inform me that it represents an entity, not me. The legal document that I use to file that legal name and represents the founding business documents for my business entity is called an assumed name certificate. Okay, so let's pause here. If we go back to our last episode, right, we were talking about the certificate. A lot of people want to get the certificate of live birth. Honestly, I don't think it's of any use to you. I don't know why you would need it, because it still is representing the legal entity. Okay? People ask me all the time, oh, how do I need to get my certificate of live birth? They don't even know why they need it, okay? They're just like, somebody said on Instagram that I should get, somebody on TikTok said, it's like, you don't even know. Figure out why you need it first before you pay the $50 or whatever it is to get this useless thing. But people will swear up and down that it's going to help them get access to their estate or some other nonsense that they come up with. But this is what is so important to realize here is when your parents filled out that birth certificate, they essentially registered the business. They created a business in your name. So that name that they spent however long coming up with, now they're saying, okay, government, you can go ahead and use this name and create this business entity, and my child will happily claim to be that business entity and commit fraud on your behalf. That's what happens, okay? Remember, the system is voluntary. Your parents volunteered you. And their ignorance of the law and your ignorance of the law up until this point is no excuse. Sorry. So let's keep going. I filed the ANC online with the Minnesota SOS, and I know by experience that this is the only way to properly register that legal name in the United States and be in compliance with the law. This is what I teach in Claim the Name, okay? I walk you through the Minnesota Secretary of State website, how to do every single piece of your registration so you can get that certificate. Okay, I can show you all mine in a second if you want to see them, my Secretary of State certificates that I got, but let's keep going. But if you want to get that, Claim the Name is linked in my description of this video, and in every video, honestly, it'll be in the description, and you can go ahead and get it, and that'll walk you through step by step how to register that assumed name and get that assumed name certificate. So, the other states' various DBA forms are traps luring in people and causing them to believe the purpose of this legal requirement is so that other people know who they're doing business with. But that is just a trick. The Minnesota ANC is an official government document certified by SOS Steve Simon and serves as validated evidence proving that my business entity is properly registered as required by law. The importance of compliance becomes self-evident if you end up in court because that is where it really matters, but I will explain that later. The Minnesota's SOS has the same official validation as any state Secretary of State has in the United States and may be used with any legal name that originates from the Certificate of Live Birth, regardless of what state in which it has been created. It also does not matter if you were born in another country and wish to file in Minnesota because a legal name on any birth certificate is still a legal name. This is great news for people who wish to stay in the USA but have no legal papers to establish a legal presence. Naturalization is another trap. The Minnesota ANC is valid in each and every state to transact business in the United States for profit without having to pay an income tax, while also offering solid proof it is 100% compliant with the rule of law. The legal name is actually a product created by the state, referred to, and by the Certificate of Live Birth. But this is not a real name, which is why it's called a legal name. It is in fact the real name flipped around 180 degrees and then disguised as a first, middle, last name. A name which is definitely not you. Now, this is where I want to look at a verse from Isaiah 29. We're going to look at 15 through 16. If y'all watch that 3-hour-long video that I mentioned in the first part in the intro of this episode, this is going to make a lot of sense to you. Like, you're going to start seeing these parallels literally everywhere, but let's go ahead and read this verse here. Ah, you who hide deep from the Lord your counsel, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, who sees us, who knows us? You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay that the thing made should say of its maker, he did not make me? Or the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding? So what is this saying? This is saying that they know exactly what they're doing, and when you flip the truth 180 degrees, when you flip something 180 degrees, a deception, an illusion, then you're turning it upside down. Then you know the truth. Okay, so you take an illusion, flip it 180, you have the truth. And why do I say 180? How does it mean upside down? Well, look at this. From 0 degrees to 180 degrees. That's upside down. Now, obviously, your name is written horizontally, so it's not going to look like this, right? But I wanted to show this to you because, again, the themes you're going to see in that 3-hour-long video are going to blow your mind, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is everywhere. Okay, so let's keep going. Where were we? Okay, here we go. This has created a lot of confusion as to what the difference is between a real name and a legal name. Here's a reported quote from Mark Zuckerberg. There is some confusion about what our policy actually is, the CEO wrote during a Facebook Q&A. Real name does not mean your legal name. Your real name is whatever you go by and what your friends call you. If your friends all call you by a nickname and you want to use that name on Facebook, you should be able to do that. So we can see now that Facebook is very much interested in you telling them what that legal name is, but Mark is simply muddying the waters by not really explaining the legal difference and why two names exist to begin with. The FML name is legally defined in CFR 100.12, identification, 52 U.S.C. 3101.13. Identification means in the case of an individual, his or her full name, including first name, middle name, or initial, if available, and last name, mailing address, occupation, and the name of his or her employer, and in the case of any other person, the person's full name and address. Nowhere in that definition will you find the word surname. This means that a surname is not the name used for identification purposes, and that your FML name may only be used in that way to identify itself in a business transaction. The word surname was derived from the root sur, which serves as a prefix meaning over or above, and occurs primarily in words with French influence: surcharge, surname, surrender, survive. This root word is the prefix sur, which means over, above, and more. We're talking about the flipping again, okay? This prefix does not indicate greatness or superiority. In number 2, it is a belt tied over a saddle. In number 14, it describes an article of clothing that goes over other clothes. Sir is not used as a suffix. Okay, so we're looking at these different examples here. Surcharge is an addition over and above the price. I have no clue how to say this. Surcingle. A belt drawn over the saddle to keep it over the horse's back. Surcoat, overcoat, coat over. Surface, the top layer as the surface of the water. Surfeit, to sicken with having too much with excess. Surplus, overplus, excess, abundance. Surprise, to make unawares, overtake without notice. Surveillance, supervision. Survey, surveyor, one who appraises, overseer. Survival, continuing to live, keeping alive. Survivor, one who remained alive. Survive. All right, we got all these definitions. Now you know the difference between a surname and a last name. They're obviously not the same. This is precisely why a USA passport, note that it is not called a US passport, has the surname strategically placed above the given name. And this also explains why that document is not considered a legal form of identification. This is why people who go down this route will get passports. Because a passport is not a legal form of identification. It is not a how do you describe this? What's the word I'm looking for? It is not state issued ID. Okay? Such as a driver's license. Because if you look on a driver's license, you will see middle, first, last name. If you look on a passport, you'll see surname and given name. Passports are legally defined as traveling papers for men and women, and this is universally understood in the law. Don't believe me? Call the passport office, which is located in Secretary of State John Kerry's office in Washington, D.C. The non-living legal name is only supposed to be used to name and identify the registered non-living legal business entity operating under that legal name, and cannot legally be the same name as the living man who uses it to conduct business in the state for a profit. Are you living or non-living? I don't know about you, but I am a living man, and there is nothing non-living about me. One common denominator is that all of these documents are issued by the Secretary of State, which is also the office with the registry of all business entities. A certificate may only be issued to a non-living entity, not to in any way representing a living man or woman. What is the legal definition of certificate? Now it gets real interesting. Certificate, a written document that is official verification that a condition or requirement has or has not been met. The certificate of live birth is a certificate, all right, but it is not proof that a legal name has been registered, because remember, you as a living man or woman cannot have any certificates. As the law requires, if one plans to use that name to transact business in the state for profit. That COLB is simply a copy of the birth record as shown in the birth registry, and that only records events, not names. That legal name is not registered until you file an ANC with the SOSUC, which is up to us to do. This is yet another trick used to keep you and everyone else totally mystified, including the government employees that work in that agency, as to the true purpose of that assumed name certificate and what that legal name represents in law. The realm of commerce is not real, and neither are any of those commercial laws, UCC, that are being thrown around on the internet. So now we also know that a passport is not used to identify you or anyone else, but rather to show anyone that asks for your papers when traveling to other jurisdictions. The surname tells someone what family you came from to indicate your inheritance, and the given name is the name you are known by or known as. Lawrence of Arabia was known as Lawrence from the region of Arabia, and I am also known as Douglas of Avalon. But these names, to not identify the man, they identify what he is known as and where he is from, neither of which identify who he is. Only entities may be identified, which means that if you obtain an ID, you are claiming yourself to be a non-living entity. Okay, this is why I've talked about driver's licenses before. We'll get into that here in a second. That's not good, of course, unless you are dead, which you're not. By properly filing the assumed name certificate with the Secretary of State, this provides my registered legal business entity an status of active and in good standing with the Minnesota SOS, which means that my business entity is legally registered and may defend itself in a court action as well as sue other entities to hold them accountable for any losses, damages to that business, financial or otherwise. In essence, the assumed name certificate is the game piece that I must use to allow me to legally conduct and transact business lawfully in the realm of commerce, while also evidencing and demonstrating that I am the living man that exists outside of that fictional realm that represents that entity, not myself. It also allows me to establish the fact that I do not own anything and that it is my business entity that owns and holds all private property held in that registered legal name. I am the registered name holder, not a registered owner. A registered owner is not considered a living man because a man cannot own anything, but a registered business entity in good standing with the state can and does own property and is therefore able to protect those assets from theft or damage by another party. A holder of property has total control and complete discretion with respect to use all property owned by and held in the name of that registered legal business entity. Let's pause here, y'all. This is also very biblical. In the Bible, Jesus, as well as in various other parts of the Bible, we are told that we do not own anything, that we are stewards of resources God gives us. We are stewards of the land, right? So, again, this is very biblical. You do not own anything. So, people who are trying to, do land patenting and, all these other things to try to own your property, just accept that you do not own anything. Okay, and if you're a rebel and you want to fight against that and you want to find a way through the loophole and be like the Israelites who were rebellious and didn't get anywhere, please go on ahead, tire yourself out. I won't stop you, but I'm just telling you right now that that is not biblical, okay? And you can thrash and fight and whatever, do your thing, but I'm just telling you you're wasting your time. A bankruptcy trustee is an example of the court appointing a holder as a trustee is a holder of any property until the owner may be found. I reiterate the fact that I do not own anything. My business entity owns everything that would otherwise be assumed to be owned by me, and that would be a false presumption. This is how people get themselves in trouble with the court. They unknowingly lie to the court and everyone else, and then wonder why the ruling is made against that person. You must screw up first. Then, all they must do is wait for you to commit the act. This status distinction becomes self-evident with the proper filing of the assumed name certificate, and is extremely important for you to understand, because if I do not own anything, nothing can be taken from me. If a person entity like the IRS wishes to take something owned by my business, they must first take this up with the courts and file a lawsuit against that person, which is the registered legal entity, not me, that allegedly owes the IRS money/tax. Since my business is properly registered, it is legally capable of maintaining that legal name in any court action, meaning it may sue another party or defend itself against another party, file a complaint, lawsuit against it. The IRS is alleging a personal income tax liability, but my business has no personal income whatsoever, and neither do I. It's all business income. And since that business is a sole proprietorship, that pass-through entity has no tax liability. I am not the sole proprietor, however. The legal name is that sole proprietor. The legal name was filed properly with the Secretary of State using the ANC, and that created the sole proprietorship, which bears the same name. The legal definition of that sole proprietorship entity is as follows. Sole proprietorship, a form of business in which one person owns all the assets of the business, in contrast to a partnership or a corporation. A person who does business for himself is engaged in the operation of a sole proprietorship. Anyone who does business without formally creating a business organization is a sole proprietor. Many small businesses operate as sole proprietorships. Professionals, consultants, and other service businesses that require minimum amounts of capital often operate this way. A sole proprietorship is not a separate legal entity, like a partnership or a corporation. No legal formalities are necessary to create a sole proprietorship other than appropriate licensing to conduct business and registration of a business name if it differs from that of the sole proprietor. Because a sole proprietorship is not a separate legal entity, it is not itself a taxable entity. The sole proprietor must report income and expenses from the business on Schedule C of his or of her or his personal federal income tax return. This means that all income that passes through that business is tax exempt, and since I am not the sole proprietor, I have no personal income and thus no personal income tax liability. All the income is business income under the control of the account holder, which of course is me, and no tax filings are required whatsoever. I open a business bank account with the U.S. Bank, and the tax identifier is the Social Security number that was assigned to that business entity by the SSA, allowing it to identify itself to the government for tax purposes. That Social Security number has nothing to do with me, you see. It is the tax ID for my registered business, and this further distinguishes the entity as a business and not me. I encourage those who wish to comply with the law to open a business account right away and transfer any and all funds from personal accounts over as soon as possible. Personal accounts are in fact fraudulent because you are signing a contract stating that the legal business name is you, and that is not true. Within the commercial realm of the United States, only legal entities and legal fictions are allowed to operate in commerce legally. And those business entities must be registered entities that are active and in good standing with the Secretary of State. So, what is the penalty for not filing that legal name properly? It is not a fine or jail time, but there is a penalty, and that is far more reaching than either one of those things. The penalty for non-compliance with this mandated law to file is that the legal name and legal entity is unable to maintain that legal entity and legal name in any court action, which means there's no way to proceed in a case brought against the business or to sue any other party in a court until proof is established that it is in compliance. In other words, that business entity may not maintain the name in a court of action, business tort, etc., and has no way of protecting and or otherwise defending itself or its assets from another party that has perhaps stolen or damaged private property owned by that business. You have unknowingly made yourself a sitting duck. That law is in place for very good reason, but there must be a way the government allows all of us to comply with that law for it to be considered good law. That law is intentionally hidden in plain sight, where it was thought no one would discover it. My discovery proves that nothing is hidden forever, and the truth always exposes itself at some point in time and must be acknowledged. Again, that is also very biblical. We must also realize the government employees have no obligation to tell us what we should be doing. That may be construed as legal advice, and attorneys have no incentive to tell us anything because then we would not need them for representation. I have already educated myself and complied with a law they may know nothing about, and it can easily get confusing to them, but I have no obligation to educate the court or any attorney either, and we all know that ignorance of the law is no excuse, correct? Why is this so important? Because we have been misled, intentionally or not, into thinking and actually believing that we are an entity by using that legal name as if it were our own name. A belief is the absence of knowledge, which is the same as saying, I did not know that. So I have no beliefs. I either know something or I don't. I have no beliefs and thus know that I am not that legal name and am able to prove it. An entity is a thing, an object or a product that is non-living. It has no heartbeat and it is not breathing. Ergo, it is not living. I am a living man that has a heartbeat, can eat, breathe, walk, and talk. Therefore, I cannot possibly be an entity, as that would be quite impossible for anything to do. I am able to prove that I am not that legal name or legal entity. The certificate of live birth is the product the state creates, produced for us to use to transact business. Bingo. This is the function of the assumed name certificate. It was created for this purpose, so that I, as a living, breathing man, may have the ability to comply with the law. I cannot function in a fictional realm because I am a man, but most people are attempting to do this without knowing what it is they are doing to themselves. This is the commission of a criminal act, and it is called false personation. Claiming to be something that you are not out of ignorance is silly, and it is illegal. Now you know why you will probably lose in a court action every single time. Do you know who you are now? The more important question is, do you know what you are not? It does not help me to know this. I already know the answer. It only helps you to know the answers to these two questions and then be able to prove it in court. If you do not see what I see, it is because you see yourself as that legal entity. Your mind may not open up to seeing anything other than what you have been taught to believe, because most people have no clue what they're doing. Only if you know who you are can you possibly know what and who you are not. The information I'm sharing did not come from any book or from any internet website. It is accumulation of well over 20 years of study and immersing myself in something that most people want nothing to do with: written law. Anyone can tap into the source of knowledge I'm showing you, but you must first be willing to accept something that flies in the face of what we were all taught in school and held as truth by most of our friends and family. I may not be able to teach you how to open your mind, but I can certainly show you the path to finding that doorway. It's up to you to walk through it. This material is actually very easy to understand once you're able to see that first, middle, last name is not you, and what filing that assumed name certificate really does. Your ability to grasp the importance of what I have done is predicated on whether you want to know the truth. Not knowing this is not abnormal. In fact, unfortunately, it is the norm, and I'm doing the best I can to make this easy to understand. Let's delve a little deeper into how this all transpired in the first place and how our minds have been controlled as a means to get us to voluntarily submit to being enslaved without knowing it. Do you have complete control of everything in your life? You can, but first you must let go of what you can't control. That is, everything that exists outside of reality and is in the commercial world that you have no control over. The fictional world of commerce you need to use to live, but have no control over, may only control you and your property when you have not filed the legal name properly. You did not create any of it, but it controls you because you are not aware of the most important rule. If it controls you, it controls your mind. Your mindset must be in the proper place, and you must open your mind to what the world of commerce really is. It is all an illusion, a fiction, a game, like a Monopoly game. The certificate of live birth is a big part of that fictional world of commerce and the game being played. But how can one prove that he or she is not a part of it? Stop partaking. Give back what is not yours, and then you will be able to get back what really is yours. That is, you stop functioning within the commercial world as a thing, knowing that fictional world of commerce that you think is real is not real at all. Give back that driver's license and cancel all other registrations you have filed, such as voter registration. People who register the legal name to vote are actually committing voter fraud, because remember that the legal name is an entity and entities can't vote. I have no problem with those who do register to vote or have a driver's license, though. It is none of my business. Now, this is really important, guys, because there are people that you will hear from. It is really a personal decision for you if you want to keep your driver's license, if you want to do any of this, right? Like, that's completely your business. I'm not going to tell you what to do, okay? It's up to you what to do. All of the information is right there. You can do with it what you will. I know that Copper Moonshine Stills, who has the passport, the infamous passport process that people do to file as a state national, or not a state national, as a national or a state citizen, because there's no such thing as a state national. But he has said he keeps his driver's license, but he's able to do that because he knows these laws, right? He knows all this, and he knows how to represent himself in a court of law if he does get hit with a ticket or whatever, right? But completely up to you what you decide to do. Written law requires that you register any name that you are using in commerce for a profit in this state, which again is the United States, by filing with the Secretary of State or a state agency that is charged with registering DBA names. For the state of Minnesota, Section 333 of the revised Minnesota statutes is where you will find this legislation. Let's go ahead and look at 333. So this is Chapter 333, Assumed Names, in the Minnesota legislature. So we can look at all of this different information. You can go through it, and then you can look at your own state's assumed name laws and see what they require, because when you go through Claim the Name and you file it, there's a step that you can take, which I honestly think is voluntary, but a lot of people freak out over it because they've just used to being rule followers. And just blindly doing whatever they're told. But they ask you, the Secretary of State asks you to post your assumed name certificate or your DBA in a newspaper. And I don't think you need to do it, but there's a lot of people that do the assumed name certificate that go through Claim the Name that say, oh, you need to file this. So totally up to you. Look at that point, I say, look at your state's assumed name laws if you really want to go down that rabbit hole. I never did it, and it's still valid, but some people want to freak out over it. Stop and think for a second. Is that certificate of live birth, or the legal name, a name you are using in commerce? Yes, of course it is. Most people use that legal name every single day in commerce to transact business, but don't realize it. You use it as if it were identifying you, the man or the woman. The problem is, it was never intended to identify you, the man. That legal name was created by the state to identify a legal entity transacting business in that state. More specifically, it identifies a business entity that operates in commerce lawfully for a man or woman for whom it was created. Filing the ANC accomplishes the task of registering that legal name and the social security number that is assigned to that legal name, oftentimes at birth these days, has a specific purpose as well. That is to associate a 9-digit tax identifier to that specific registered legal business entity that has been filed with the SOS. This is important because there could easily be more people filing that exact legal name, but there are never two identical social security numbers associated with the same legal name. The ANC guidelines clearly point out that filing with the SOS does not copyright or trademark that name. It registers it so that it can be verified by anyone that wishes to evidence that name is indeed properly registered and had a status of active and in good standing. This is the same sort of status that a licensed corporation has when it has properly filed and registered with the SOS and provided it is following the rules of the game. There exists one major difference. That is, the ANC is not a license. It is merely a DBA. And that is a significant difference. Why? Because any license is a license to break the law. If you have a driver's license, for example, all a law enforcement officer has to do is accuse you of breaking a law, and the burden of proof is on you to prove otherwise. Why? Because you are claiming to be a fictitious entity, not a living man. How does one prove they are a man and not a fictitious entity? The ANC does that, and that, my friend, is the sole purpose of that filing with the SOS. Now, you do not need a license or permit to drive or to build a home or to buy a car or do anything else you desire. Your registered business entity operates in commerce for you, which proves that the certificate of live birth legal name can't possibly be you. So this comes back to that first understanding of who we really are, and more importantly, who we are not. You are not that legal name on the certificate of live birth, but you must be able to prove this to anyone that inquires, because there exists a presumption that everyone is that person. That is known as a legal name. And most people step right into the trap of going down to the county or to the SOS where that COLB was created and pays to get a certified copy of the COLB. Then they unknowingly hurt themselves by using that legal name or certificate of live birth, which was voluntarily paid for, and go down to the DMV to obtain a driver's license. This requires that an image of that man or woman be digitally superimposed on a card called a driver's license, right next to a first, middle, last name that is not their name. So driver's license is nothing more than a fictional entity or thing created by the state at the request of an ignorant man or woman to use in commerce. But it is fraudulent, and you are breaking the law that requires that name be filed properly with the Secretary of State. When you operate as a fictional character in their realm of commerce, thinking, of course, that the certificate of live birth legal name is you, you are violating the law without even knowing it, making yourself that game piece that is not really you, because it is, in fact, a non-living entity. This explains why having a driver's license is a death wish. All licenses are a license to break the law. It also evidences that you have not filed the certificate of live birth name with the Secretary of State, as the law clearly requires, providing that the judge with total judicial discretion to rule as he or she desires with no actual relevance to law. The 17900 of the California Business of Profession Code states the following. As used in this chapter, fictitious business name means, in the case of an individual, a name that does not include the surname of the individual. Remember that old maxim, ignorance of the law is no excuse? That goes both ways, of course. And once a man has you comply with the law by filing the assumed name certificate with the SOS, registering that legal name, you are now fully compliant and can prove that certificate of live birth legal name is not you. The presupposition that you are that legal name, legal entity is immediately put to rest, and the table turns 180 degrees in your favor. That legal name now works for you instead of against you. By the way, state employees are not told what I have just shown you to be the truth in this paper. If you are damaged in any way, your entity has standing in court, provided you are able to evidence that your legal name on that certificate of live birth has been properly filed with the Secretary of State and has a status of active and in good standing. Now, you know why a judge has total discretion in deciding your case if you have not filed properly, because you are providing him or her with that discretion by failing to have any standing in their court. You can't defend your business entity or sue anyone else. Your registered business entity evidences that you, a CEO, have standing in any court, and therefore any and all discretion that judge may have assumed to have does not exist. You are not able to evidence that your legal name has standing, so you can defend yourself and, if need be, sue any corporation or person, including the United States Incorporated, and win. Also, there is a form of restitution for people like us that are in compliance and have been damaged by poorly trained government employees. By the way, guys, if you are someone who does want to take on this fight, that does want to sue for any reason and represent yourself in court, I do have a course linked in the description below. If that's something you're going through right now, and you want to learn how to win in court without a lawyer, then I have a course linked down below. It's called Jurisdictionary, and you can check it out. It's, I think, around $200, but it basically goes over all of the procedures of court, everything you need to know to win and not need representation. Even if you do have a lawyer, like a state-appointed lawyer or something like that, still very useful information. So if that's you and you want to get that information, that course is really good. It came highly recommended by my mentor, who I trust fully. So if y'all want to check that out, it is linked below. All right, let's keep going. Okay. Also, there's a form of restitution for people like us that are in compliance and have been damaged by poorly trained government employees. This form of restitution, known as unjust enrichment, shifts the burden of proof to the government/defendant to prove that it did not unjustly enrich itself. Only an entity may have standing in a court. A living man or woman won't be recognized in a court. Remember, the first thing any judge asks in court is to state your full name. Once you have identified yourself as that legal name, you have just stated that you are a dead man. You cooked your own goose. This is the voluntary nature of everything in commerce. It's all in that legal name and requires that you claim that entity is you. So then, it is this form of voluntary act that explains the voluntary nature of the personal income tax and why anyone who claims they have personal as opposed to business income may have a personal income tax, why the government tells everyone the income tax is voluntary, because until you properly file that legal name on the certificate of live birth with a proper authority known as the Secretary of State, you have no way of proving that you are not that legal name. So remember, you don't have any personal income. You only have business income. All right, just FYI. That presupposition exists and always will exist because your mother acted as an informant by telling the so-called government she produced a product. Bingo! Yeah, but I never consented to this, Lisa. Why should I perpetuate their lie? Well, you're the one lying. and your parents are the ones who volunteered you. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. Why are you considered a product, and how can anyone tell an entity something and have it somehow respond that it understands? Look up live birth in state law, and you will find the answer to that question. You see, ignorance of the law is absolutely no excuse. How many times have we said this in this PDF? Like 3 times now. But if you know the law, you know the rules of their game, and are therefore no longer ignorant. Anyone reading this for the first time is probably ignorant, and may take this personally, but that is ignorant as well. The people that created government also created the fictional world of commerce, so they made the rules and the rule of law is what governs entities, not men and women. If you know the rules as well as I do, your business entity operates in commerce for you, and you have therefore averted any and all problems associated with law enforcement. You have stopped volunteering to partake in that fictional world of commerce illegally and unlawfully. You are operating legally and lawfully through the use of that ANC and the business entity that you created as a means of complying with the law. Now you are 100% legal and compliant, while pretty much everyone else is not complying and have no clue they are breaking the law simply by claiming to be something they're not. No wonder everything is upside down and so difficult to figure out, right? I simply figured out the rules and know them better than most people. Therefore, I win the legal game every single time I play. I can't lose. The best analogy I'm able to provide is the popular game of Monopoly. The United States Incorporated created the game of commerce, and they're providing you with a game piece known as the Certificate of Live Birth, the legal name. When you play the game like you do just about every single day and use that legal name in commerce, yes you do, pretty much everyone does, you're violating the golden rule. You know the rule that states any name that is used in commerce must be filed with the Secretary of State? Bingo. Do you see it now? Do you see how everyone is doing this to themselves by voluntarily stating that legal name is them? How can a man or woman be a legal entity? They can't, which is exactly why the government can do anything they wish to you until you comply with that golden rule. You give that judge total discretion to throw you in jail, fine. You, whatever he or she wishes, and you have no say in the matter. Even written laws don't matter because you have failed to understand that you are acting out of line by stating that you are a fictional entity, and of course, court is commerce. You are pointing a gun at your own head, then pulling the trigger. This is simply an analogy, but you get my drift. That when we stop volunteering, we stop partaking in that game of commerce, and are able to prove evidence we are living men or women. How? By presenting the evidence. What evidence? The properly filed assumed name certificate demonstrating you're in compliance with the law and your business entity is active and in good standing. Remember, no one is forcing you to admit that the legal name on that certificate of live birth is you. You submit to that voluntarily without realizing it. How do you know who you really are if that legal name is not you? I will first ask you, from where did you come? The answer is that you originate from your family. Your mother and father conceived you. You were born into a family, and that surname of that family identifies where you came from. You were conceived at some point in time, and the family name is referred to outside of the legal realm as a surname, not a last name. Attorneys intentionally confuse this name conundrum by claiming the last name and surname mean the same thing, when in fact one is living and breathing, the surname, while the other is non-living and considered to be dead, the last name. The last name is last, while the surname is first, and then followed by a comma. A first, middle, last name has no comma or punctuation marks, a major distinction between the two. Although they appear to be used interchangeably, the law clearly states the distinctions by legal definition. Now you know the family name, aka surname, is not your last name, but can anyone tell you why anyone would knowingly place their family last? That would be ridiculous to put your family last, when family always comes first. The given name always follows a surname and comma. Pause, because that is the name your mother and father gave to you and who you are known as. It does not identify you. Why? Because any name that identifies something cannot be a living, breathing man. It may only identify a non-living entity, such as vehicle, which is tangible. A legal name identifies something intangible. An assumed name certificate identifies this entity as legally transacting business in the state for profit. Shakespeare wrote a script for a play called Romeo and Juliet that refers to the name. Julio, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, and I'll no longer be Capulet. 'Tis by thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? Romeo, defy thy name, and for thy name which is no part of thee, take all myself. Shakespeare was indeed a 33-degree Mason, and this, my friends, is exactly what Freemasonry is all about, creating illusion and then putting the truth right under your nose that would expose that illusion to you. Y'all, this is what, this is the topic of that video that I told y'all about, the 3-hour long video, this one right here, Mystery of Life. That is what it's all about. So, watch it. Because, again, it's going to expose so much to you. So much to you. It goes so much deeper than just legalities. But, how good is God that he puts the truth out for us, right? Alright. It's right under your nose, but you do not see it. I am exposing the illusion and in the process pulling back that curtain, demonstrating that the almighty Oz is just a man with a cape and a pointy hat. I've broken that cursed spell and made myself free from the bondage of my own doing. That spell has been eternally broken now, and all that is left is for you to act on it. Your actions are what define and identify you as a good man or a good woman. We all have God's will instilled within us, and God created us to be like him, not to be him. Our Creator wants us to be good, but for good to exist, so must the bad, evil. Otherwise, there would be no choice. Good cop, bad cop, light and dark, happiness and sadness, freedom and bondage, yin and yang. We are doing all this to ourselves. All of the pain and suffering in the world shall end when we stop partaking in what is causing our own pain. Waking up and seeing the light is the beginning of that process. I am simply pointing you in the proper direction and showing you the door, that's all. The rest is up to you because you must walk through that door. I'm not attempting to persuade or convince anyone that what I'm telling you here is the truth. And that is not possible because everyone must figure this out before it has become knowledge. And at this stage, few, if any, people know this. A belief is the absence of knowledge. This is why I do not believe anything. I either know something or I don't. If you tell someone that you believe in God, what you're really telling them is that you do not know. Beliefs and entities only exist in fictional realms. A realm is something fictional. And this means that government, commerce, and religion are all fictional realms. Only non-living entities may legally exist in a fictional realm, such as that which constitutes government. Government is an entity as well, and within which all statutes and codes exist. An entity is always a non-living thing. Reality TV in and of itself is an oxymoron. TV is a non-living thing, but is just staged to appear as if it were real. A license is only issued to entities. What is a license? This is a good one for all of you who have driver's licenses and are somewhat pissed that people such as myself drive every day and do not have a driver's license or numbered plates on the vehicle I drive. I know that I do not want or need one, but you seem to think I do because you think you need one, and you may even claim you want one. But after reading this, you may want to change your mind. Why? Well, this is why the term license is taken from the root word for the term licentious. What does licentious mean? Here it is. Simple definition of licentious. Sexually immoral or offensive. Wow. And the more complex full definition of that word licentious is lacking legal or moral restraints, especially disregarding sexual restraints, prostitution. Marked by disregard for strict rules of correctness, rule breaker. So, what does all of this really mean, and why does it even matter? Well, contrary to what most people think, when one applies for and obtains a license, that license is required to break the law. That's right. If you don't have a license of any sort, you cannot possibly break any laws. What? That may not appear or seem correct to you, but it is correct, and the law spells this out very clearly. Here's an example of this in the Motor Vehicle Code. California statutes and codes state that no person shall drive a motor vehicle. Yep, that is the law, which then goes back to that definition of person. If I have a driver's license, doesn't that provide me the right to drive/travel? Nope, it's not a right to drive. It's a privilege that can be taken away, suspended, and we know this happens all the time, right? That driver's license actually makes the act of driving a motor vehicle illegal, and that privilege may also be taken away from the licensee for any reason, and for no reason whatsoever. All one must do is have that ID on their person, and that automatically makes that person a criminal, because it cannot be you. What's in your wallet? If there's a driver's license in there, you are taking a huge risk. Probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Allow me to explain. You unwittingly gave the God-given right to drive and travel and live when you exchanged them all for government privileges. Yep, you did that without knowing what you were doing. We all did, though, so don't feel bad. We unwittingly waived any and all God-given rights we may have thought we still had by stating and admitting that we are a legal name, and that legal name is once again a non-living entity. Saying that you are a non-living entity is a big fat lie. This may seem rather confusing, and it is. The scheme and master plan was specifically designed to be confusing and complicated as a means to discourage someone like me from asking relevant questions. Employees cannot answer many of the questions I ask them, saying that what I'm saying is unintelligible and therefore unimportant. After all, everyone is doing it, so must I do it too? Yes? No! This train of thought is foolish. Just because everyone is doing something does not make what it is they are doing legal and correct any more than someone acting the exact opposite of everyone else makes it wrong. I'm doing the exact opposite of most of you. I do not have any license of any sort. A license is permission to do something wrong, ergo you must have one in order to break the law. If you don't have a license, there is no way to do something that violates a law, which would normally result in the issuance of a fine, jail, or both when you are found guilty. So license is what provides the evidence that it is your intent to break the law, because without one, breaking the law is impossible. Are you confused enough yet? Did you really intend to screw yourself? Probably not, but it certainly appears that way to the cop. He will say, tell it to the judge if you argue or claim innocence. If you have a license in your wallet, you have permission to be licentious, considered by definition to be lewd conduct marked by a strict disregard for the rules of correctness. Quite honestly, that license make you look like a perverted whore. Wow, perhaps the license is not such a good idea then. People that label themselves persons with a first, middle, last name unknowingly step into a huge pile of crap because they have no idea what they're doing. Remember that a license must be applied for to that agency known as the DMV. To apply is to beg, and then money exchanged in return for valuable consideration. This makes the registration of a vehicle with the DMV a business transaction in the state, and the profit is going to the state, not you. Haha. Remember that nothing can be forced upon anyone, and that includes a license to drive or to do anything else. Government employees have no obligation to tell you this, but it is intentionally omitted from the instructions when you request a certificate of live birth. The employee at the county clerk or a Secretary of State's office does not know this either, because if anyone, such as me, knew, they would not be subject to those written laws. Your registered legal business entity could be cited or arrested and thrown in jail, but it's not you, so you will never go to jail. What a brilliant trick. You have been played and hoodwinked by the British accredited registered slime and the banking elite families. But please do not blame them, for it is us that have been our own worst enemy. You are self-destructive and don't know it. Brilliant. If one is doing something to harm themselves voluntarily and without thought, that will always be legal, and it is actually imperative for the scam or plan to work properly. The DMV is a very compartmentalized agency in that employees each have very specific tasks they must complete. Carrying out that specific task may put one at risk of personal liability. Why those sneaky little, wait a minute, no pointing fingers at anyone else now, it's your fault because you were never forced to do anything. Remember, everything is voluntary. Well then stop volunteering. Aha! Now fear seems to be a problem because people are afraid to drive without a license and think if they take that public number plate off and replace that with a private property plate, their vehicle will be taken. That number plate tells that cop you are driving public property, which means you are given a privilege to drive it only if you pay the rental fee to use it. That is called a use tax, and people give that gift to the DMV every year for the privilege to drive that vehicle they think they own. A man or woman cannot own anything. They may possess it and control it, and that is all I am doing. Fear is manufactured with lies and misleading information fed to us via television and now social media. Our minds are bombarded with BS every day. Fear is actually man-made. We are scaring the crap out of each other and then blaming one another for all the problems we are having. This may seem crazy, and it is. Stop the madness and start living. This paper is a lot longer than I initially wanted it to be, but then all those people out there illegally operating in the realm of commerce, transacting businesses with licenses would never know how licentious they really are, and now realize how easy it is to correct this problem. Peace, love, and light to everyone that reads this. You are now on the right spiritual path and know what you need to do. Authored by Herrick Douglas Joseph, CEO, DBA. Douglas Joseph Herrick. All right, y'all. A masterpiece. Whew. My throat is tired, I'll say. But I hope that going through this whole PDF gave y'all a better idea of where we're at and what's going on here. Last but not least, let's answer some of y'all comments on previous episodes that you have left. If you have any comments from this episode, go ahead and drop them in the comments below and I'll make sure to answer it in the next video. But here is one comment. So, could you help clarify, in the process of taking the name, after that, what should the step be with the current employer and taxes? Also, if you have a commercial driver's license, is there any special procedure for that? Thanks. Well, hopefully this video answered a lot of that for you. As far as your taxes go, you can go ahead and, I can make an episode on that if y'all want to go over the taxes, but hopefully this video gave you a little bit more of an idea. Also, you're not taking the name, you're becoming the name holder, okay, when you go through claim the name. So if you're interested in doing that, the process that Herrick Douglas Joseph outlined in the PDF, I have a course where I take you step by step through the Minnesota Secretary of State, show you exactly how to file it, how to get that certificate, and remember in the PDF he said there's a very specific way to do it, so that's what I teach in the video. And then somebody else said your YouTube channel came highly recommended for tutorials. I don't see any of the videos that were mentioned. Do you have a private membership for access to your content? Claim the Name is going to be my only course with a tutorial. That's where I teach how to register your legal entity, which we just did a whole video on, so hopefully you can get access to that if you want. It's linked below in the description. And you may be thinking of my TikTok. I am a lot less on my TikTok channel, or my TikTok profile. My brain is fried from doing this for so long. Very long episode for me, but you can go ahead and check out my TikTok if you want. I'm actually transferring my focus to the Holistic Sovereign Show here. So if there's anything specific that you want me to create content about, you can go ahead and let me know. Let's see if there's any other questions. Thank you for your work. This is a vast topic. You're very welcome, Willie. Found your website after searching state national stuff. Glad you have a YouTube. Have you heard about Brandon Joe Williams? Yeah, he has a course called Contract Killer, which has a lot of really good information. I've shared my thoughts on sovereignty teachers and the ones that I trust in the first episode of this show, and essentially said that anyone who is not God honoring, I do not fully trust. So Brandon kind of falls into the same category for me. He is incredibly inappropriate a lot of the time with his language and not God honoring in any way, but he's very well researched and he shares good information. So I do think he has good information, but he's not my go-to for things. But I can verify he has good info. So if you want to learn from him, you can go ahead and do that. Let's see what else is here. Gabe says, can you talk about the first steps one should take? The first step you should take is registering your assumed name certificate, and you can go through Claim the Name to do that if you would like. That is the most important thing to do. Is there a difference between a state national and a foreign diplomat? All of these things are just different classifications of entities in the United States system and their corporate system. So, that's something to consider. It doesn't really matter what you're classified as. What matters is your business registered, and hopefully this episode gave you more of an idea. Let's see if there's anything else here that I want to answer to. All right, perfect. Well, thank you for leaving those comments, guys. Again, please share your thoughts, your comments below. I will make sure to answer them in future episodes. If you haven't watched episode 1 and 2, go ahead and check those out so that you can get caught up. Episode 1, I talked about the biggest sovereignty lie you've been sold. Episode 2, we went deep dive into U.S. birth certificates. So, I'm kind of trying to go in a chronological order. As always, please share this with someone you care about, someone that you think would benefit from this information. I'm on a mission to get this information out there and spread it as far and wide as possible. And that is not possible without you guys sharing this. So please share this with someone. That would super duper help us out. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not yet, so that way you can get updates whenever I post new episodes. I want to try to post these every Friday, but I am pregnant, so, whatever life throws at me, I'm just gonna try to go with it. We just moved houses, so I took a break for a couple weeks, but I'm really happy to be back because this is what I love to do. And then next week, or I should say in the next episode, I'm going to be talking about finances, and I think we'll have an interesting conversation about licenses possibly, because we just saw in this PDF by Herrick Douglas Joseph that any license is, shooting yourself in the foot, which I don't believe 100%, because in my financial services business, I do hold a state license, but I do believe also that it is anyone's business, and not my business what they choose to do, the same way that it's my business what I choose to do with my business, right? And holding a state license allows me to basically take care of my family in the best way that I can and help other people. So I don't necessarily agree with any and every license is just breaking the law. It's completely up to you what you do with that. My team and I are actually actively figuring out ways to, make sure that you're covering your business and protecting it from the public as much as possible. So that's actually something. I just recruited a wonderful lady who is a tax professional. She helps people with taxes, and she told me that finding Claim the Name and doing the assumed name certificate really helped her to really figure out her process and be able to help a lot of people. So she is like creating trusts and doing all this really cool stuff, and she wanted to make sure that she could, protect herself against the state if anything were to happen, and we had a really great conversation about that. So anyway, we'll be talking about finances in the next episode. I'm going to be talking about some of the biggest financial lies that you've been fed, things that I'm doing myself to set up my family for financial success, and also an opportunity to work with me if you want to go into business with me, right? But remember, that does require holding a state license. So, if you're like super against that, then it's not for you. We're not looking for you. Sayonara, that's fine. But anyway, that's it for this episode, y'all. I am very happy that I can share this information with you. Please share your comments below again, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye, y'all.